In today's Flutter Foundational series, we are going to be talking about drag and drop functionality in Flutter. We're going to go through several examples, and I'm going to be showing you how you can implement a drag and drop functionality in your own apps. Now, before we begin, if you guys like web development, app development, then you definitely need to subscribe, because on this channel, we are going to be talking about different app frameworks, different web frameworks, and different ways of building apps, all simplified so that any beginner can get started right away. So before I show you the apps that have drag and drop functionality, what is drag and drop? Well, drag and drop is exactly what it says. It's the ability to drag certain widgets, certain pieces that you're displaying in your app into different areas of your app. So let's say you have an app that looks something like this. You have different widgets. Well, you can drag and drop one of these widgets inside another one. So let's say you have 4 widgets. Well, you can have 3 widgets because you can have one widget inside another. This is obviously a very, very simplified example, but I think you're getting the point of how drag and drop is crucial to building a user-friendly and user productive apps. And obviously, when it comes to Flutter, you can drag pretty much anything and you can drop it pretty much everywhere. So here I have some sample apps that implement a drag and drop functionality to various degrees. So let's go ahead and run this first app so that I can show you a very, very simple example of drag and drop functionality, and then explain to you exactly how you can implement it into your apps as well. We're going to run this app right here. All right, so here's our first app. This is drag and drop example number 1. And here we have a widget that's draggable. And here we have a drop target where we can drag and drop this widget. So if I drag this, what's going to happen is I'm dragging, and as I'm dragging it, I'm seeing another element. So I can drag it, drop it right here. Now, you're not going to be seeing any changes reflected in the UI, and the reason for that I'm going to explain to you a little bit later in the video. But the important thing to notice here is that we have this object that's draggable, right? Like, this is not draggable, right? I cannot drag this, but what I can do is I can drag this into this. I can't drag this into there. Nothing would happen. But if I drag and drop this into here, then I can have something in my app reflecting that, okay? So if I drag this, we now have three elements here. We have the source widget. We have this widget that I'm dragging right here, as you can see. And we have the target widget here. So if I don't have anything, if I'm not dragging anything, then we only have 2 widgets, okay? That is an important thing to understand, because that is something we're going to be talking about in the code. Another thing that you may have noticed is that in the initial state, this is kind of a dark blue color, similar to the header here. But if I drag it, that source widget right here, it becomes kind of a lighter shade of blue. Okay, that is an important thing to understand as well. And here I can drag it right there. Okay, so now that you've seen the demonstration, let's go ahead and look at the code, and let's see how the code is implemented and make sense of it. So it's very, very intuitive. All right, so here we are inside of our IDE. We are looking at the code, and I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is a free IDE that I recommend for your Flutter development. Here's the app that you just saw, and this app is fairly simple. Okay, we have a body, center, we have a column, and then we have various elements. So we have a children element here inside the column, and inside that we have this draggable widget here. Okay, then we have a sized box, which is used to kind of have a little bit of spacing, right? It's the spacing between 2 widgets. And then we have the drag target. Okay, so the first widget, the draggable, is wrapped inside of a draggable here. This is our draggable widget. Now, it's important to understand that when it comes to draggable widgets, there are certain things that we can also configure. So for instance, we have feedback, we have the child when dragging, and then we have the child itself. Okay, so what is feedback? Feedback is used to represent something that we are dragging, okay? So here we have feedback and we have a container, okay? And this widget will be displayed under the mouse. So if you're dragging it, this thing under the mouse, right? This whole thing This is this feedback widget. And in this case, we have a container. We have a width and height of 100, pretty much the same as the source widget. And then we have the color blue with opacity 0.5. And this means that opacity is set to 50%. Okay. Typically, if you are using colors, you're using anything, you're going to have opacity of 100. That means it's fully in color, right? There's no transparency. But opacity of 0.5 means that it's 50% opaque and 50% transparent. And that is why if we are dragging it, you see that it's kind of a lighter shade of blue. This is the one that's under my mouse right now. It's a lighter shade of blue. It's not as light as this one, right? This one is very light, and you're going to see why. But this one has an opacity of 0.5, so 50%. Now it has a child there, a text widget that says dragging. And then we have various decoration, text decoration 9, none, font size 20, font size normal, and color black. So I can change maybe the color here. I can make it red. And now if I reload the app, you're going to see that the widget that we're dragging, it's going to have red text in it. Okay. So this widget that we're dragging, this is this draggable feedback, right? This is feedback. This is this widget that's under feedback. Okay, this is the widget that we're dragging. Next, we have child when dragging. Okay, so we have the source widget. This is this child, but we can also specify what happens if we are dragging from that child. Okay, this is different than feedback. It's still source, but while we are dragging it. So in this case, we're setting opacity to 0.2. Okay, that's only 20% opaque and 80% transparent, right? And that is why if we are dragging it, this initial widget right here, right, that says drag me, it has a very, very light shade of blue. And that is because it has 20% opacity and 80% transparency. So it's very, very light blue. And last but not least, we have our child widget. Okay, and this has colors.blue. And this is that blue color that you're used to seeing, that blue with 100% opacity. Okay, so no transparency. And it says drag me. So if I change it to something like green, you're going to see it being reflected. So if I come back here, now this is green. This is this initial widget. When I drag it, I still see that initial widget. And that is because there are three things happening. There's the initial state, there's the state that the source widget changes to, and then there's the state of the widget that's under my pointer. And these represented by the child when dragging, and the feedback. Okay. Another thing that's very, very important to note is that we can also include some data that we want the target, the destination to know about. So in this case, my draggable is a string, and I have some random data, and we can actually access the data in our source, and you're going to understand why that is so important. So that is what we have when it comes to source, the source widget. Next, we have the drag target. Okay, and this is the widget that accepts our draggable widgets. Okay, now you have to understand that we can drag this anywhere potentially, but this part outside this drop here, it's not gonna react to our drags. Nothing is gonna happen. Nothing is happening even if we drag it here, and I'm gonna explain to you why that is. But at least if we drag it here, our system is able to accept it, and we can change state. We can do something inside our app. But if we drag it outside this drop area, nothing is going to happen. Okay. So let's quickly talk about this drag target. Now, this drag target has a builder, and then it has a bunch of other methods. So the builder is responsible for building and returning the drag target widget. And we're only going to have one builder, unlike what we have here with the draggable, where we have different representations, different things happening. When it comes to the target, we're only going to have one builder. In this case, we have a container that's slightly bigger than the source widget. It's 150 by 150 as opposed to 100 by 100. And then we're giving it a decoration. And the reason we're doing a box decoration is we want to set a color, right? A border, right? So we're doing a border. It's blue. The width is 2. And then we have a text child widget that says drop here. So I can change this blue to, let's say, black, and that's going to change the border. So if you reload this, we have this border that's black right here. Okay. and I can change the width, make it a little bit thicker. Okay, and now it's a thicker border. Okay, so all of this is customizable. And obviously this is a builder, and it can, it can you can customize it as much as you want. It's just a widget, right? Everything in Flutter is a widget essentially. So we have a container. Now, another thing having to do with this builder is we also have accepted and rejected. And these are going to hold the objects, the information that we accepted or that we rejected. Okay, so more on that in a little bit. But the most important thing here is that, remember, if you want to drag something, we want something to happen with our app. Okay, while we are dragging from the source widget, we can specify what happens here. We can specify, but this one, it's not changed. It's that the way you react, right? Flutter is very, very reactive. The way you react to what's happening, and that's the point here, right? You don't want an app that does nothing, right? You want an app to react one way or another. And so the way you react to your draggable events, the events when you're dragging a widget, is using these methods here. So we have an onMove method, and this is called when draggable moves within this drag target. We have an onLeave method. Okay, this is when we leave the target. We have onAccept, right? This is called when we actually release the mouse pointer and it's accepted, right? We also have onWillAccept, and this returns a Boolean, meaning true or false, where we need to specify whether we are willing to accept whatever is being dragged into this target. And the reason that's important is that you can have many, many random widgets on your screen, and obviously you may not want to accept all of them. You might want to accept maybe, a few of them, maybe certain types of widgets, maybe text widgets, maybe widgets with certain data, right? You may not want to, accept all of them, right? So for this case, we are returning true, okay? But we can also return false, and we can reload the app. And that means that we're not going to be accepting. We can still drag over it just like before, but we won't be able to do the logic in the app when we accept the widget. So that is important to understand. So I'm going to change this back. And you also may have noticed that we have some print statements. And the reason I have that is to show logging information as to what's happening, right? So let me go ahead and open my login screen, and you can do that here. I'm going to clear it. Okay, so I basically pulled a little split screen here from the bottom, and I selected debug console. And now if we go back to the app, right, let's say I make it a little bit smaller so that we can see both screens, and I drag it, you see as I drag it over, it says entered, okay? And the reason it's giving us a lot of kind of entered values, that number just to the left of entered is how many times the word entered is being repeated, is that this onMove is being called not only when we enter the drag target, but also as we move around, because it's passing in important locations, like where exactly we're dragging it, right? So if I drag it over, while I keep dragging it, it's going to be called. Now, if I leave called, I have left being called, and this is onLeave, and that's just being called once because I can only leave it once without re-entering it. I re-enter and I have entered, and then I leave it. Okay. Next, it says onAccept. So if I drag it and I release the pointer, we also have an event that tells us when the widget was accepted. So if I drag it in here, it's entered. I leave and I enter again and I release, it says item drop. Now, if we change this to false, this is not going to be called because we will not be accepting it. So let me go ahead and reload this app here. And so even if I drag it there, it says left. That is because it doesn't accept it, right? So I'm going to change this back to true because we do want to accept. So now we have a simple app that tells us when something is happening. This is very, very important. This kind of feedback is very, very important. And so if we reload this app and we drag it, it says item drop. We drag it again, item drop. Now, remember I mentioned that this builder has a context, which is what every builder has, and also has accepted and reject. Well, accepted holds all the widgets that we dropped into this drag target, and rejected are the widgets that we reject. So as an example, we can actually change what happens to this drag target based on the widgets that it has accepted or rejected. So here I have a piece of code that would change the color of this container based on the fact of whether it has accepted various widgets or not. So it says here, if it's empty, it's gray. But if it's not empty, it's going to be green, right? The color. And so now that I have a color here, I can remove this box decoration because they are redundant. We're going to comment that out and we are going to reload the app. The app has been reloaded. And now you can see it's gray. And that is because this color is conditional based on the fact of a number of widgets that this drag target has accepted. So if it's empty, it's gray, otherwise it's going to be green. So if I drag it in there, you see how it changes the color here, okay? And that is because it accepted it. Okay, so it's changing it to green. So we can have that kind of logic happening. Now, you may have noticed that even if I drag it in here, it's changing it to green. When I stop dragging, it's back to a gray. And that is because we're not keeping state, right? Remember, this is a stateless widget. We are not keeping state. This widget is not keeping any kind of information as to what happened previously, right? So if I drag something, it's not, there's no place of it to kind of keep track, number of widgets dropped or something else happening. And in order to fix that, we have to create a new application using a stateful widget, okay? So here I have a second application. This is my app stateful. And in this case, I'm using a stateful widget instead of a stateless widget. Now, what is the difference? Well, with the stateful widget, I can create a state using another class. So I have this class, I have this method inside of a widget called create state, and that creates my app stateful state. Okay, and this is this state here. So this is no longer a widget that's built into stateless widget. This is now a state, right? And inside the state, I need to have variables that hold some kind of information. So I can have many, many variables, but you definitely need at least one. Otherwise, what's the point of the stateful widget? And so in this case, I have dropped items. So this is a list of widgets. It's an array of widgets or a list of widgets, whatever you prefer, that essentially keeps track of the widgets that are being dropped into the drag target. So let's go ahead and comment this first stateless widget out, and let's go ahead and enable this stateful widget. And so now if I reload the app, you're going to see a completely different behavior. So this is my new app here. And as you can see, I have two draggable widgets here, and I have a drag target here, right? So if I drag that, you see how it keeps state, right? So I dragged it, I let go of the mouse, but it still kept state. I can do it again, and it keeps state. And this is because this whole thing needs to be a stateful widget, right? We need to be able to keep track of state, such as number of widgets that we dragged or something else. We need to keep track of information that's changing throughout the app, okay? So I can drag this one and it's drag. I can drag this one and I can drag one more. Now we have an overflow, but that's fine. I'm going to be showing you exactly why we have it and how to fix it. But the point here is that we are able to drag and it keeps track of everything. Okay, so very, very important thing to understand. So what exactly is happening here? So let's go ahead and take a look at the second app that we have. And it's very, very similar. It's very, very similar, except for one big change is that, well, a couple of changes. This is a stateful widget now. And we're keeping a track of the widgets that we have dropped in the drag target. Okay, so let's take a look at this widget, this app real quick. So we have a column made up of children, and we have a row here, right? And inside of this one row, we have a bunch of draggable widgets. So we have one widget, two widgets, and we have two widgets here. Remember, these are these two widgets here. This is this row here. We have one big column, right? We have this one big column and we have one row. This one row has two widgets, item one, item two, space evenly. And that way there's some nice spacing, very, very nice functionality. And, this is a container, and a container has a child, item one, and we have some data, right? This is this data container. We also have some feedback and we have a child. Okay, same thing for the second widget, except this is red this time. This one is blue. We have two draggable widgets, okay, with a data property, feedback, and a child. Okay, next, we have a sized box of height 20, and this is this thing right here. This is the spacing, right? Remember, this is a column here, and all of these elements are essentially going to be aligned vertically. Okay, so we have a row, we have a sized box, and then we have a drag target, right? And this drag target is a container. Okay, this is this drag target here. And so we have a drag target, we have a builder, context accepted, rejected. We're not going to be using these two variables because we have state. We don't really need to use them in this case. And so what we have here is we have a container, and inside the container, we are checking, is dropped items empty? If it's empty, then we're going to display drop items here. If it's not empty, then we're going to display whatever is in that list as widgets, as child widgets, okay? And next we have unwill accept. We're going to say true. We are being passed this data element, this widget, so we can take a look at what kind of widget it is and whether we want to accept it. In this case, we're unconditionally accepting all the widgets. And then we have this unaccept method here, okay, of this main kind of widget, of this drag target. And in this case, what we are doing here is once we accept something, we are adding it into dropped item. And we are doing this inside of set state call here. And this set state is actually part of state right here. And the reason we have to do that is we are essentially telling Flutter, this is a good way to kind of demonstrate to Flutter that whatever is in here, if it changes, right, dropped items changes, and remember this dropped items is right here, we want to rebuild this widget. We want to rebuild this the UI, right? That is kind of what we're doing, and we're only doing it when we're adding new widgets into dropped items. And as a result, when we drag something there, it keeps state. It knows that they're being dragged and it keeps track of it. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have an overflow here. And the reason we have an overflow is that this drag target has a fixed height. Okay, so if we increase the height, let's say we have a 300 height, now we can drag more and more widgets here. Okay, you can keep doing that and you can fit in more widgets here, no problem. Another thing that you can do is you can remove the height altogether, and as a result, what's going to happen is going to take the height of its child widgets, of its children. So right now it's taking the height of its drop items here, but if we drag something in here, it's going to take the height of this. So I can keep dragging, and it's going to automatically expand until it fills the whole screen. And we are going to have another overflow, okay? And now you have to fix this other overflow by making it scrollable, by making it auto-extendable, and things like that. And you can see more how to fix that in my layout video, which is going to be in the corner of your screen right now. So that was a drag and drop example where we are actively keeping state. It's not like before where we are dragging and dropping everything and nothing is being reflected on the screen. And in this app actually knows what's happening. It's actually keeping track of what's happening. And that way we can show the user of what they have been doing throughout the time they've been using the app. Because otherwise, they might think, they're trying to do something, but it's not being reflected on the screen. Now, in this final example, I want to show you an app that has functionality where you can reorder different items in the list, and it works slightly different than the methods that we talked about in the previous example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out the second app, uncomment the third example, and I'm going to restart my app here. And here's the new app, and this is an app that allows you to reorder items. So it's kind of like dragging and dropping, except we have purely a list, except we can drag and drop different items. So I can put 4 as the first item, I can put 1 as the last item, and I can essentially reverse it. So 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. I can also drag and drop it like this, drag and drop it like this. Now, let's take a look at the code and see how that works. We're going to scroll down to that final example. And what we have here is a new app, and it's a stateful widget as well. And that is because we need to keep track of state. And in this case, we have the items that we are displaying, but we also need to keep track of where the items are in the screen. If we reorder them, that's a change of state, and we need to show the user that. Now, in this example, we are not using draggable or drag target. This is a completely different technique, and this is a technique you want to use if you want to build a list that allows you to reorder the elements. It's a completely different technique, but still I wanted to show you in case you're going to find it useful as well. Okay, so here we have the kind of the main build method here. We have a body and we have a reorderable list view, and we have children there, and we are cycling through the items, and these are the items here, just a bunch of strings. It's a list of strings, and we're creating a list style, right? We're creating a key, and we're creating a title. We can also create like a leading icon if you want. There's a bunch of things that we can do, like, there's selected color, icon color, text color, so many things that we can do, but we're just keeping it very, very simple and minimal. And we have a method called on reorder. Okay, so anytime you reorder it, we need to do a couple of things. We need to do a little bit of math here. So if old index is less than new index, we need to subtract 1 from new index, and that would guarantee that it's working fine. So basically, this means if new index is greater than old index, meaning we moved it down, we need to adjust the new index. And here we remove the item at the old index and we insert it at its new index. Very, very simple. A lot easier and a lot simple than the techniques I showed you before, but also less flexible. This is only for lists. It's not for just about any widget on the screen. It's only for lists. Okay, so you have a regular list view. Here you have a reorderable list view. Okay, but we also have a lot more methods, right? So if you come over here, if you check out this reorderable list view and you take a look, you have on reorder start, on reorder end. You have a bunch of callback functions as well. Plus, you also have a bunch of properties here, scroll direction, primary, shrink wrap, anchor, etc., etc. So you have lots of interesting things, but it's interesting that you can also react to when reordering starts and reordering ends. So you can react to that as well if that's what you want. And you can do that by simply typing on, and then you can pick reorder end, and you can finish the function. You're given the index of the item that you're moving. So I can type something like print reorder end. I can do something like this, and if I reload this app, we should see something in the console. So if I start and I end, it says reorder end, and I can also do reorder start. On reorder start, we're gonna pick this, and I can say reorder start right here. Now I can come back here and I can start. As you can see, we have the message, and if I drag it, reorder end. So this gives you a little bit more flexibility if you want to do something else, right? Tell the user it's moving, maybe change the colors, change some visual elements. It gives you a little bit more flexibility. But these are optional, whereas this one, you definitely need to do a little bit of math. And even if you come back here and you hover over this, you will see that this is required on reorder, right? Because you need to do something, but these are optional. Okay, so this is another method to kind of put in your back pocket in situations where, you've built a list, but you want to kind of spice it up and make it so that users can change the order of those items. So another nice thing. But if you're looking for something more complex, you're building UIs, complex, comprehensive UIs, then you definitely want to be looking at these first two examples. We have here a drag target and we have a draggable here. These are the main ones you're going to be using in your app. Now, this video is part of our Flutter Fundamentals. I also have several other videos that I've published on different topics having to do with Flutter. These are videos that I feel that every Flutter developer, whether they're beginner or more intermediate, needs to know and needs to master. So if you want to master Flutter and build amazing apps, definitely check out all the videos in this series. Now, as always, if you want to check out this source code, you want to kind of play with it, you want to change some of the things around, you can get it using a link that I'm going to have in description. I'm going to have a GitHub repo where you can essentially get this code, clone it, and play around with it on your own computer. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend you check out this video that you're seeing in the corner of your screen.